I literally remember very vividly sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag, no water, no lights, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing?
Everybody wants to escape. They want to get out of the rat race. Both of you did that.
When I graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life.
You started doing some remodeling. You talked about buying a house that said enter at your own risk or something like that you were telling me about?
You couldn't even drive in there. It was so overgrown. A week on a skid steer and a Mini X, and I could have this place looking amazing.
How many acres were you looking at here?
We bought 30.
Traditionally, the definition of a barndominium is going to be a structure that is typically used as a barn, but you've converted part or all of it into a residential dwelling.
Right.
But really, people equate this word with the way that they want to live.
Wow. So it is really a lifestyle.
I quit my job and we weren't making a dime. I keep asking myself, I don't understand why I kept doing it.
Well, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Most people are going to be sitting there listening to this and saying, all right, DIY, and you're going to go spray foam? That's ridiculous. That's going to cost more to put foam in than the whole entire build. Why would you do that?
When I was going to build possibly my final home, I wanted to use the best product I could. It's high end. That's what I'm using. I put a slide in the house for the kids next to the stairs. And underneath that space, I put like a little cool hangout area for the kids. And I just happened to look in there and I saw like a puddle of water right off the bottom of the drywall. I had fiberglass insulation up there, so I peel it back and it is soaking wet. My heart's dropping. I'm panicking and I'm like, I got a real problem. I have to figure this out because no one else is going to do this for me.
Well, hello, everybody. It's Mike with Spray Jones and Think Spray Foam. Today we have an amazing, distinguished set of guests. We have Emily and Paul Marshall. You might know them from Marshall Remodel or MrPostFrame. They are out of Iowa in the United States, and they specialize in the construction and building of your dream home, post-frame style. The country lifestyle is in big demand right now. So please welcome today into the studio to have a lengthy conversation about spray foam, a spray foam disaster, and how to build a house right, Emily and Paul Marshall.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mike. It's been quite a journey. We'll just start out kind of giving you a background of where we came from and kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Before we get into where you came from, you had the worst possible scenario that anybody, we're going to talk about it later, but when I first met you, it was because you were having to rip out drywall that shouldn't have been because your spray foam insulation and your batten poly was dripping water. It was a nightmare and you were looking for answers.
It was quite a story. And when we were going through it, I just remember, how can this be happening? But hindsight's 2020. It's the best thing that happened to us as Barndominium designers and builders, which we can obviously get into that all later. But that's how we met. That's how our relationship started. One of the best things that's happened to us, actually.
Yes, I think
Amazing.
we've learned over the years that some of the most difficult things that we have been through have ended up being able to be a blessing to other people or teach us what we needed to know in order to move forward to the next level with our business or our family or anything like that.
Excellent. You are living the American dream, the new and improved American dream. Not that the old one was wrong. It's just everybody wants to escape to the country now. They want to get out of the rat race, the busyness of the life in the city. You did that. Both of you did that. Paul, you had a very unique story because you came out of a situation where people were shooting at you. You were kicking down doors. You were in law enforcement in the violent crimes. Tell us about your history, about where you started out in life and how you got to moving from Illinois to Iowa.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a farm kid. I grew up in northern Illinois on a farm. It was about 800 acres. We had a ton of cattle, ton of hogs, kind of your typical farm in the early 80s. And I fell in love with basketball. So I played basketball through high school, got a scholarship to go play at the University of South Dakota. I never really knew what I wanted to do, but my favorite class in school was construction or, shop class. And when I graduated from college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I'm like, well, there's an opening at the police department. I'll just go be a cop for a while. They have a good retirement. And little did I know what I was getting myself into, but I spent 15 years in one of the most violent cities in America, in northern Illinois. And I'm glad I did it. But through that process, I needed a mental break and I wanted to get my family to somewhere that was safer to live, where I could raise my kids the way that I was raised. I just up and quit one day and, we moved to Iowa.
Moved to Iowa. That's a huge upstart. Why Iowa?
Well, a couple reasons. Emily grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Yeah, I grew
Okay.
up in the eastern part of the state.
And then my parents had sold their farm in 2015 and moved to northern Missouri. So this was kind of like an in between spot, couple hours from my parents, couple hours from her parents. Nobody knew us here. There's giant white-tailed deer, which is a huge part of my history as well. That's how I got involved in the video and editing and all that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of a multitude of things that kind of landed us here.
It's interesting how people pick up the skills along the way that they're going to need for where they're going to be later in life. That you had told me something about working with Midwest whitetails, and I think you were doing pro staff hunts with them, and you learned how to do videography and editing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how your life, everything you do in your life can kind of later on help you out. I wish I could say I was smart enough that every step I took was a plan to this, but it was not. So, when I was a cop, we would buy just unlivable houses and we would remodel them. I worked for a mechanical engineer at one point. I worked for an electrician at one point. I did pipe fitting, tinning. I did a multitude of things. Never did I know that they would come back later in life to help me. And I'm the type of person that, like, if I'm going to do something, whether I like it or not, I want to learn to be efficient. I don't want people to have to tell me what to do. So I really would assert myself to gain as much knowledge as possible. And then being a bow hunter, I got into video and editing with Midwest Whitetail when that was started in 2008 and produced hunts for them for, I don't know how long,
About a decade.
probably about 10
Wow.
years. So I learned a ton about, the whole process of doing that.
Right. So you've moved to Iowa. You're doing hunts. How did you find the land? What was the next step that you got into? Like you started doing some remodeling. You talked about buying a house that said enter at your own risk or something like that. You were telling me about.
Yeah, we did that a couple times.
Yeah. If you can't live in it, then it's like we call it the Marshall special. Like we
Marshall.
are we're like flies to you know what when it comes
Yeah.
to things like that. Right when he quit, we had our third child was about 8 weeks old and he moved to Iowa a few weeks later. So I was in Illinois selling our home that we had remodeled that he had literally like just finished the renovation in order for us to put it on the market. So I'm at home with a 4-year old, a 3-year old, and a newborn
Wow.
in Illinois. He's in Iowa spending 7 days straight there. The realtor we were working with was mid flip on a house. So there's no running water. No, I don't even know if the power was on. It was a mess. It was a disaster. And we're like, oh, let's go ahead and buy it. So we buy that house and he starts living there and trying to get it. And then he starts working on it when he's not at work.
I was 38 when I left law enforcement. I can remember, going and staying at that house. I got a job with Magellan Midstream Partners, which is a fuel and oil company. So I went from being, kicking indoors, car chases, all that every day, to working at a fuel and oil company, which I found to be very unfulfilling and boring.
Wow.
And we had bought this house and I'm like, okay, I got to get this thing livable so I can move my family here. So I literally remember very vividly like sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag, no water, no lights. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? I'm leaving this beautiful house that I just remodeled. I got a 15-year career. But then I got it livable and you guys moved. And how long did I work there before I decided that was not the path for us as well?
Sure. So he moved in January. The family moved into that house in May. We only had one running water source at the time. So we had a bathtub. So we would wash all the dishes, clean the tub out, and then bathe all the kids and clean it again because that's what we had to do. There was no, the kitchen wasn't functional. So it was quite the ride the first few months of us living there and getting established. And then that fall, I had found this piece of land online and I had sent it to Paul like months prior and he's like, I don't like the shape of it. That fall, somehow for some reason, the land was off market and Paul decided like, oh, maybe I will look
Hmm.
at it.
At that point, I knew I didn't want to continue working for the fuel and oil company. So I'm like, I'm gonna start my own business. I'm gonna start a
Hmm.
construction business. I love building stuff. I love remodeling. So that was the plan. So in order for us to do that, I needed to get back out in the country, which I wanted to do anyway. So I had a place to
Hmm.
run my business out of.
Right.
We were unable to find, 5 acres with a house for under $700,000, right? So
Wow.
that's just not feasible. And then the house would have to be remodeled. So we started looking for pieces of land. Emily had found this, and I had been looking at other ones, and I was down in this area looking at a different piece of land. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to swing by it. You couldn't even drive in there. It was so overgrown. Nobody had been taking care of it forever. So nobody was buying it because they couldn't see, they didn't have any vision.
Oh, right.
I'm like, a week on a skid steer and a mini X, and I could have this place
Yeah.
like looking amazing. So worst case scenario, I could spend a week cleaning it up and I could flip it and make some money. So we bought it, to make a long story short, and then we decided I always wanted to build a post frame home. Being growing up on a farm, I was familiar with them, and I'm like, I want to turn a barn into a home.
But how
And
many
so we decide
how many acres did you get? That's an important part. Like, how many acres were you looking at here, Paul and Emily?
we bought 30. So at the time, the lot we bought was 30 acres, and it's primarily timber, brush. We've cleaned it up now, so there's some open ground and whatnot. But yeah, it was 30 acres.
Yes. And so that happened that first fall. And by winter, Paul was like, I really, I cannot keep working at this job. But we were also, mind you, still mid renovation at this house, in West Des Moines. And so we applied to be able to rent a townhouse because I said, I've maxed out my ability to do no running water, you know, all that kind of stuff.
You went
It was
longer than
like
I
our
would have.
kid. Well, right, right. Like, when you have, it's like, oh gosh, like just everything is difficult. And on top of that, I have kids in diapers and, just different things like that. And so I was like, I'm maxed out. So I said, I need to live somewhere. And so before he quit his job, we made sure we applied to rent a townhouse. And then literally, I think we got accepted and he put in his notice like the next day.
We were a little worried that if I quit my job, we wouldn't then be able to show that we were making income.
Right.
Now, we did do Dave Ramsey when we got married, and we
Right.
were debt free before we had kids, which allowed us to make any of these moves in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that everybody needs to be aware of. That was intentional, that we wanted to be debt free so that we would have options.
Right.
Without that, we wouldn't have been able to do any of this.
Yeah,
Right.
not all of them are options that I want to have again, like the no running water part. But we definitely we had options. We had the ability to make these they still had to be very bold, high risk moves.
Right.
But we were still able to make them and figure it out. A little resilience went a long way.
What year is it by this time that all this is happening now?
So early 2019,
Okay.
when we moved into a townhouse, it was bitter cold. It was in February. We officially started our LLC in Iowa. Actually, today is the anniversary
Wow.
of that, and officially started our YouTube channel
Wow.
on March 6th, 2019, and decided that he would quit that. He quit that job and said for the next couple of months, he needs to finish renovating this home that we were living in. But since we've moved out of it, it'll be easier. And then we'll sell it. And then we'll have the cash to go ahead and start this home build on this land that we had bought. At the time, I didn't even refer to it as a barndominium because there really wasn't a lot out there about barndominiums.
Right.
Like we kind of pioneered some of the content around it.
Right. So describe for me what a barndominium is. Now, most of the viewers are going to know it by now, but you were in fledgling territory at this point. What is it?
Well, traditionally, the definition of a barndominium is going to be a steel frame or a post frame dwelling, a structure that is typically used as a barn, but you've converted part or all of it into a residential dwelling.
Right.
Today, the definition has definitely expanded. A lot of people consider themselves to be in a barndominium if they have some sort of metal cladding on their exterior. There's a sense of open concept with their design layout. But really, people equate this word with the way that they want to live.
Oh, really?
Almost everybody wants to live on an acreage and have a barndominium because it's communicating the way that they want to raise their children, the way that they want to look at their food sources, the way that they want to look at their work ethic, and everything like that is wrapped up in this word barndominium for most people that we talk to.
Wow. So it is really a lifestyle change. Just like, you're a
Yes.
a yuppie was a stockbroker living in a penthouse in New York kind of thing, rich, young urban professional. And Barndo is sort of getting back to traditional family values, traditional homeschooling, living off the land, your own property, your own house, your own garden, stream running out back, kids and the dog. Well, a good country music song. Like that's what we
Yes.
want to have. Or what used to be
100%.
old country anyhow.
Yes, 100%. People love that. That's they imagine, and we all have different nuances, but you're dreaming of a way that you want to live when you say you want a barndominium.
So take me through the dream. You've got 2019, you've started the YouTube channel. You got 30 dreamy, beautiful acres. I've seen the drone shots. We're going to be putting a bunch of them on here of your place. It's amazing. We need a lot of really good B-roll from you guys here because we're going to mix that in massively. It's your story. So how can we not? Tell us about how you got started on this build. This is fascinating. Everybody wants to hear, okay, can I do it? How do you do it?
Once we had made that decision that I was going to have my second midlife crisis in my late 30s, I had 3-4 weeks left of work, probably, maybe not even that. So we had a really good plan. Let's finish this house. We'll sell it. It was paid for, so we'll have all of that cash to put into our new home that we're going to build. I designed our home on a piece of grid paper.
Wow.
It definitely got a lot bigger than my initial plan. My initial plan was, a 2,400 square foot ranch. Our main structure is 48 by 48, 2 stories. So it's 4,000 square feet of living, 5 bedrooms, 5 bath. It's pretty amazing. And then we have a 40 by 56 attached garage, 4-bay garage. And then in the back of that, we have a canning kitchen, all that. So we drew this all up on 1/4-inch graph paper. That was my plan. And, it kind of goes back to all those things I've done in the past, the electric, the plumbing, the HVAC, like all that. I knew in my head how I wanted to do all that based off, all the remodels I've done that time I had with those different trades and whatnot. We sold the house and broke ground, and I mean, the rest is kind of history. It was, I was telling somebody the other day, like they asked me what was the most enjoyable part about what we've done so far, and I can honestly say that I quit my job and we weren't making a dime. I think it was 8 months before we started making money again, and that was the most enjoyable part of my life, building my own house. I mean, it was definitely a struggle, probably more of a struggle for her than it was for me, obviously because of the kids, but it's been quite a path.
So you started the YouTube channel and you've decided to take the viewers for a ride, an amazing ride. They're going to come along and see piece by piece how you're going to put this thing together and all the decisions that you're going to make, which is amazingly brave because I don't think I could do that in my own life because I would want to censor, oh, I screwed it up over here and I didn't make this right and we fought over this and that. You have the lion heart. You were like, no, we're going to record this and we're going to start updating this, and tell us about that journey. Like all of a sudden barndominiums and then the COVID hit and poosh, your channel just blew up. What happened? How did that happen?
My original plan with YouTube was to use it as a way to show people in this area the kind of work I do.
Right.
Emily's plan was a little bit different than mine because she had known about YouTube before I really did. So I'll let you
Right.
explain your kind of
Yeah.
your thought behind the process.
Right. So to be perfectly honest, when we had our first child, I started watching more TV because I was at home with one baby. It was
Yeah.
very relaxing.
Yeah.
And came across YouTube, and that was back in 2013. So I mean, we're talking early YouTube, and I'm watching these beauty content creators
Mm,
making all these videos and tutorials. And I was like, well, that's fun to watch that, but that would make sense if you just did it, but you did it for construction. Like, you did the same model. And
right.
so I had explained that to Paul, and unfortunately, we didn't start our channel right away with all of our other projects. But then when he came and he said, "Hey, I want to build a post frame home. It's going to be like the barns on the farm, except we can live in it. Is that okay?" He said it's super low maintenance. I said, "Well, you got me sold on the low maintenance part." And I said, "We can do it so long as you go on YouTube with it."
Right.
So I said, "You have to do it." I said, "I wanted to do that years ago, but today, now is the time." So he agreed that he would go ahead and film. We bought a GoPro, and you just dove right in because
Yeah.
of your background. You knew kind of the ins and outs of how to get good shots and how to do good interviews, and
Yeah.
dove right in.
And I had some other cameras that I used for hunting or for video of my hunts and stuff
Right.
like that. So I mean, nothing crazy, right? Most of this was documented with, a $2,000 Sony camera that I had owned for a few years already, and then a GoPro.
Right.
I keep asking myself, I don't understand why I kept doing it because we went so long with very few subscribers. We weren't making any money, but like I just kept doing it. And I can't even pinpoint why I kept doing it,
Right.
but I just did.
Right. Somehow we both had this like knowing that like it was gonna work somehow. We weren't afraid of any of the risk. We told each other multiple times. We're like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And we're like, well, we'll have to sell everything and start over. And to be perfectly honest, we'd probably be in the best financial position we've ever been in if we did that.
Right.
So to us, that meant there was no risk. Yes, it was a very hard time. And yes, there were a lot of struggles, things that go into doing something like this when you're trying to simultaneously build your family a home, build a brand new business, and try to connect, build a community around you, all the while having really small children. We started the home build, and at that time, the children were 5, 4, and 1. So everybody was still home full time with me. And that, to be perfectly honest, brought a lot of difficulty to the overall project. I applaud parents that want to kind of follow in this same type of path and they have children that are very young because it's really difficult. A house under construction is a giant death trap when you're a 1-year old.
Yeah.
There were so few instances where it wasn't incredibly like could had incredibly dangerous elements to it. So that's why I didn't get that involved in the filming and the building of our home the first go around because somebody had to keep the kids from walking off the loft onto the concrete.
Yep.
Nobody's going to get work done when you have 3 little kids running around that they don't care. They just want to hang out with their parents.
Yep.
So they don't care that dad needs to build the bathroom wall and things like that. So that's why I wasn't around a whole lot.
Mm.
It's one of those things in hindsight. I don't know if I had been in a better spot if I would have been able to like emotionally manage it better, but
Yeah,
maybe not.
I don't think with like where we came from, 15 years in I had a really high stress job. It was incredibly dangerous. So if you had that stress, you had the stress of, the kids, you had the stress of me buying these houses, getting them livable. Like you were at the end.
Yes,
Like you're
yes.
really.
Yes. So for anybody listening thinking like these guys just kind of sailed through it all, like especially during our home build, I was completely worn out. Like I was past the point of exhaustion in every single aspect of my life.
Wow.
Which is unfortunate, but again, it's part of the story and what got us here and part of what I think makes me better in this stage of our business and our family life.
Right.
And I probably pushed you about as far as I could. I'm a dreamer, like I'm a visionary, so like I could see what the inside of this house would look like. Like I knew in my head, I'm just like, just trust me, this will be amazing. You'll love it. And
Mm.
I give Emily a lot of credit for trusting me. And I think that trust was built through like some of these remodels we'd done. And we actually worked really good together on all the colors, the finishes. I mean, that's kind of her thing. I'm just like, it's going to function right. You're going to have plenty of storage. You're going to have the kitchen you want. You're going to have the bathroom you want. Just trust that this is going to work out.
Yes. So meanwhile, while I'm very worn, very exhausted, very much at my wits' end on a daily basis, I did know because one of Paul's strengths is that his spatial awareness, he just has this way of taking a space and maximizing it to its full potential. I use the example of a house that we remodeled that it was barely 2,000 square feet of living space. And yet somehow he still managed to have a separate mudroom, a separate like butler's pantry off of the
Mm.
kitchen in this house. Like he just knew how to take, and everything felt open and spacious and like there was plenty of room. So
Right.
he just knew how to do it. So I knew going into this home build that he would deliver something that was max functionality
Right.
and looked really good. Didn't look like some husband and wife got a wild idea and decided to design their own custom home with no experience. Like I knew it was going to turn out great. And then we really have we've done a great job over the years melding our styles together
Yeah.
so that both of us are reflected in the color palettes that are used in the materials that you see throughout our home. It's definitely not saying this is Emily's house or this is Paul's house. You can definitely see that it's our
Right.
family's home.
And you're doing that now. You're offering what you've learned to the American public. Like you're selling these plans and these barn plans. Like there's more to it than that, but you're selling layouts and schematics and coaching on how to do what you did. We're going to get into that a little bit more about how you've built, but that is a major part of the MrPostFrame future, is providing the ability to achieve the dream to other people, right? Through plans and what
Oh,
have you that they
yes.
can buy.
Yes, yes. We're both very, very passionate to educate, to support, to help people along the way because of the difficulties that we've experienced, and knowing that it took more than either of us had to give and we still kept going. I
Right.
feel like it gives us the authority to say, I think you can do it too.
Right. The
Because
authority, yeah.
there was yeah, there was nothing easy about what we embarked on, and we didn't do it perfectly by any means. Everybody still makes mistakes throughout their
Oh,
business, but I
yeah.
look back on things and I think, well, goodness, we could have done this and this and this and this and this, and it would have gone smoother, it would have been cheaper, it would have been faster, it would have been all of these things. But you don't know until you know. And so that's what we're focused on now, is helping people so that you don't have to go through quite as much.
Right. Right.
And we can provide that knowledge because we know how to like look back and say, what are the steps we should have taken and how can we empower you to take those steps?
So 2019. All right, you've got 4,000 square foot home, 2,400 square foot shop, 48 by 48, and it's 18 feet high. Your shop is going to be 40 by 56, and then COVID hits, and people are sitting at home because they've been told to. They're watching channels. They're thinking about, how do I escape? How do I get out of this rat race? How do I get out of the city? Oh, wouldn't it be great to start life over? And all of a sudden, what happens? Your channel blows up. Poof, all of a
Oh,
sudden,
insane.
overnight rocketry. Like, is this right? Did I hear this right? That you were featured as creator of the day or creator of the week or something? What was that in YouTube?
Yes. Yes. So I'll back up just a couple of months to Thanksgiving, November
Mhm.
2019. Paul published a video about how much our barndominium cost.
Okay.
And that was our first piece of viral content ever. So we had started the channel in March. November, we start going viral. We went from 300 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers in a matter of a couple of days. And then it just kept going. So by the new year, we had about 15,000 subscribers. And then we hit April,
Right.
and YouTube featured our channel as creator of the day,
Right.
meaning they pushed it out to absolutely everybody on YouTube.
Wow.
And so we gained about 30,000 subscribers pretty much that day.
Wow.
And for a channel that was only about 20,000 subscribers, that was enormous.
It was a game changer because, we started this YouTube channel with maybe the hopes that someday it might do something, but it became reality, real quick. And it started opening up other doors for us that we didn't know were going to be
Right.
available.
Right. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Because
And now,
that's how our paths crossed. Your YouTube channel
mhm,
and then the Spray Jones
Yeah.
YouTube channel. But we're going to get to that intersection here in a bit. It's not quite there yet. That'll be when you get to your spray foams part of the story.
right?
Yeah.
That really energized both of us, I think. We were very excited about that opportunity as content creators. I mean, it didn't mean that every brand on earth was knocking down our door, but it definitely meant that
Yeah.
we could start saying, hey,
Mm.
we're somebody that you might want to work with.
Right.
And so we did end up being able to save some cost on our build because of the success of our channel. That was really fun. Like, it's one of those things where it's like we didn't know any other content creators. None of our friends were, to be like, wow, I think like we're starting to become real content creators, and this is kind of cool and this is pretty fun. And so the channel just did so well moving forward because people really were invested in Paul building this house. It was a one-man show. He
Hmm.
was very transparent, he was very honest.
Yep.
Anytime we had somebody that helped him, you saw that person in the video, but it
Yep.
was very few and far between.
Right.
So you knew this guy is actually doing it all on his own.
Sure.
And it was impressive. I mean, people go back and watch some of these older videos, and one commenter the other day with a string of profanities included was like, this guy built a whole house on his own. Like,
Yep.
yeah, it's like it's very impressive when you watch what happened. This is
Oh.
this is like just this guy.
Yeah. Well, the family, the land, you were living, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, the revised from the dead American
Yes.
dream of get back to the
Yeah,
country,
and
take the family and build it yourself.
people were very afraid. And the more you were in a city, the scarier things were at that time. And so this offered a reprieve.
Yeah.
It offered a lot of hope to a lot of people of saying, if I can get out, then I'm gonna be okay. It was the start of a whole community of people really saying, we want to be more involved in how we live, how we raise our kids,
Mm.
how we grow our own food, all of those things. It really catapulted the homesteading and the barndominium industries.
How do you see that community now? Before we get into, we're going to get into the spray foam section here in a minute because we're coming up to that part in the build. But okay, that's how it was in 2020 and 2021. How is it now, Emily?
I think that it has continued to gain traction and strength. There have been some immense challenges, though, along the way, because
Mm.
with the coming of 2020 into 21 into 22, building prices skyrocketed. And
Sure.
so did the price of land. I mean, most of us are aware that real estate really went crazy as well. And so now we have a community that's still longing for that, but there are a lot of difficulties in the way for a lot of folks because some stuff started becoming out of reach for people.
Right.
When you're talking, land values literally doubling in the course of 3 to 4 years. And some of the elements of our home, we were very fortunate. It was like we were ordering things and doing things literally days or weeks before that industry had a huge price increase.
Right.
I mean, we somehow stayed ahead of it by days. You started talking to people who were at the beginning of their journey and they went, oh, wow, like my bill just went up by 6 figures and I did nothing to the design. It was things like that that created an impact. So we're still in that challenging phase where people are still trying to wrap their head around the price increases and how things are so different than they were 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Right.
But overall, the community is still eager. So we do have a lot of folks, they just said, we have to turn to DIY.
Mhm.
We have to learn how to do more of this ourselves. And so that's really where Paul and I have found connection. We found a growing community in the homestead barndominium space, specifically with people who want to self general contract their builds or self perform a lot of the work. So
Right.
that's where we dedicate the majority of our time, the majority of our content creation is to help people because most people are in that spot where this is the only option,
Right.
is to DIY.
And you're designing, Paul, you're designing plans now and distributing them through some building manufacturers, I understand?
Yeah. So we own a company. It's called Back 40 Buildings. It's an architectural design firm, and we design all over the country. We've even done some in Canada. I mean, actually, quite a few in Canada and even up in Alaska. We've designed all over the place. So we have a whole team that is part of that. I think we have
We have 8 staff,
8 staff members.
yes, that work with people. We did plans in 37 states last year.
Wow.
We have conservatively about 40 plans a month that go out the door that are all barndominium related. They might be steel frame, stick frame, post frame, ICF, SIPs, whatever the construction type. And that's the thing that really drew us to get into the architectural space for barndominiums was being able to provide what we call buildable plans by a builder, meaning that we are taking into consideration how the client wants to construct their build and making sure that the plans reflect that with proper structural details and things like that. And also to be able to, again, tie back to the DIY community to give a DIYer an accurate, well thought out set of plans that they can use in order to build their own home as a non professional in the space.
We kind of have to back up to how we got to that point. So, as our channel started blowing up and we were closing in on the end of our build, people started reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, will you build me one of these? Will you build me one of these?" And that just kind of opened a door for us to start our own construction business as far as
Did
building
you
these.
did you have a hunch ever that that's where it was going to go? Like you're doing your own, but you're like, you know what? I kind of like this. I would do this for somebody else if they ever ask. And then there they were.
Yeah, I mean, I had done so many remodels, and you do something for so long, you kind of get tired of it. So I'm like, man, building from scratch is kind of fun,
Hmm.
right? Like I'm not fixing problems. But I mean, I don't know if I really grasped like what it would turn into. I didn't realize the opportunity that this would give us. I thought that that's might be what we do, but never really to the extent it was.
It's incredible. Well, that's part of the dream as well, is if you do something well, people will come to you and say, teach me, show me. Emily's left for a meeting, but you want to talk to us specifically about spray foam. How did you come to the realization to even use foam? Because most people are going to be sitting there listening to this and saying, all right, DIY, and you're going to go spray foam? That's ridiculous. That's going to cost more to put foam in than the whole entire build. Why would you do that?
Yeah, so, if we back up to when I was in law enforcement and I was remodeling houses, I mean, I was using fiberglass insulation. I was making sure that my roof was in good shape, that my walls were in good shape, that I was wrapping the house. I just didn't like it. That's just who I am. I was researching different insulation types, and then, I started reading about spray foam, specifically closed cell spray foam. Because
Right.
in my mind at that time, it seemed like, the best product. When I was going to build possibly my final home, I wanted to use the best product I could, to,
Right.
to air seal, to kind of simplify things for me. Because when you get into the north, I mean, and this could be a whole nother topic in and of itself, is you're dealing with where does the vapor barrier need to go? And there's so much information out there on the internet that contradicts everything. I'm like, well, if I use spray foam, and I hadn't researched it far enough, which we'll find out here in a second, but I'm like, I want to use this. This is a great product. This seems like a no-brainer to me. It's high end. That's what I'm using. So when we got to that point in our build, and this was just before we moved into the garage, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to spray the garage, spray the house, finish out the garage, and then we would move into it, and then I could be present here on site so I could do all the work in the house. I got a recommendation of a spray foamer in the area, and he had, from the people I talked to, he had good recommendations, everything. So he came out and he's like, okay, this is what I recommend. 3 inches of closed cell spray foam. And so he's like, it'll be a vapor barrier, but you need to add more R value to the wall because you have this 8.5 inch wall cavity or whatever. So we'll put fiberglass bat over the top of it. It'll help deaden the sound, and it'll give you a higher R value. Me not being educated at the time, in depth on all this, I'm like, okay, that sounds like a great plan, whatever. So he comes in, he sprays it, and the bad insulation goes in. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I'm a pretty meticulous person. So I looked at some of the work that he did and I questioned him on it. I'm like, it seems like this is a little thin here. He's like, oh, this is going to be just fine. Even an inch of spray foam is better than anything else. So we kept moving forward with the house. We got the electric done, got the plumbing done, had the drywall put in, and I don't remember what I was doing, but I walked into the house, and underneath our stairs, I put a slide in the house for the kids next to the stairs. And underneath that space, I put like a little cool little hangout area for the kids, and I just happened to look in there and I saw like a puddle of water right off the bottom of the drywall. And I'm like, oh, one of the kids must have been in here doing something. So I went in there, looked, and I'm just, the investigative type. So I start walking around the house and I go in the master bedroom. And in one of the relief cuts, I hadn't grouted them yet. I could see water in the relief cut. So now I'm like really concerned. So I go into our master bathroom, which we have a tile shower on an outside wall. So I didn't drywall that because I was going to put up cement board and tile. So I had fiberglass insulation up there, so I peel it back, and it was unfaced. So it wasn't like I had a double vapor barrier thing. It was
Yeah.
unfaced fiberglass
Yeah.
insulation. So I peel it back, and it is soaking wet, like all of it. I mean, just like soaking wet. Now I'm like, my heart's dropping. I'm panicking, and I'm like, I got a real problem. So I go around to the house on the main floor, cut out drywall, same thing. Go upstairs, cut out drywall in a bunch of different spots, same thing. All of it soaking wet. So I'm like, man, this is a major, major problem, right? So I call the spray foamer and say, hey, any ideas what's going on here? And he's like, hey, listen, it's middle of winter, which he was right. So that exacerbates the problem. You just put drywall in, so you're adding a ton of humidity to the house. We'll get some dehumidifiers and it'll all dry out. And I'm thinking to myself, that is not an option for me. Like, we're talking about, like, I could grab it and wring it out. I mean, I think you saw that. I mean, you could wring this insulation out and it was just, I mean, it was soaking. Like, there was large volumes of water there, which I understand that drywall in your house in the middle of winter brings a lot of humidity into the house. So I called the distributor, IDI Distributors, which is where he gets all his stuff, and I demanded that they come out to the house. So him and IDI came out to the house, and they were walking around looking at the spray, the issues and stuff. And I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but it was not a very nice thing that he said to me. And right there, then and there, I knew like I had a major problem. And IDI was like, well, I don't want to throw them under the bus because they've been great for me. They've given me support and everything. But I'm like, I'm gonna have to do my own investigation. Is the end result of what I came to the conclusion that like I have to figure this out because no one else is going to do this for me. And so to make a long story short, our project was on hold for 70 days
Wow.
where I could do nothing. I couldn't tear out drywall, anything. I went in on a, and this is where my law enforcement background came into play because I had done these massive federal investigations where I had cases where I had 1,000 reports, hundreds of pieces of evidence. And so I just went full investigative mode on this. I called every spray foam manufacturer in this country, demanded to speak to their technical team. I can't remember which, I have it in my notes. I have a huge binder of information that I found. There was a one guy, and I can't remember which company it was, provided me a document that was on sprayfoam.org that talks about the flash and bat and how it is supposed to be properly done. And I started reading into this and I started getting into the building science of where the vapor barrier and these cold climates is supposed to be on the warm side of the wall. But by putting this fiberglass, we're now shifting that vapor barrier from the warm side of the wall
Yeah.
essentially to the outside, right? So I had to make my own report. I contacted his insurance company and they hired an engineer. He came out. This guy didn't know anything about spray foam. When he came in the door, I had like tape all over the walls, like where it was too thin, where he had used screws that weren't covered. I had this whole thing documented and I handed him this huge packet. I'm sure it was pretty intimidating when he started reading through it and all the information I had in there. And at this point, I had met you. One of my followers said, "Hey, I follow this guy, Spray Jones, and he connected us. And then I had talked to you, and you had given me a lot of insights of what it should actually look like, what should have been done, and all that. So I had a very good report for him. And the end result was I did win, and I recovered most of my money. My project was delayed 70 days. All of the drywall in the house on exterior walls had to be removed. The bad insulation had to be removed. Mold remediation, because even in the first week, there was already mold growing.
Oh, yeah.
I made sure I did all that, dotted all my T's or I's, crossed all my T's. But the spray foam that was there didn't need to be removed. At the end of the day, it was just a poorly executed installation.
Yeah, that was such a tragic event because I have been against flash and bat for a long time. This wasn't really actually a flash and bat scenario in the traditional sense. To define our terms, most people refer to flash and bat as getting an inch of closed cell foam, inch to an inch and a half, and then making up the difference for insulation value. I'm not even going to say R value. There's just in order to hit a prescriptive code requirement, they're going to put bat insulation in front of the closed cell foam. That is intrinsically very dangerous for cold weather climates because air is going to go through your vapor barrier, through your air barrier, if you have one. If you don't, there's nothing stopping it. And then that air carrying the moisture can come in contact with the closed cell spray foam. And if the spray foam isn't sufficiently thick to keep the surface temperature warm enough when it gets really cold outside, then the surface of the spray foam can get cool enough that you can now condense the water vapor that's in the air. In your situation, you almost had a perfect storm. You were supposed to get 3 inches. You didn't in a lot of spots. You had screws and fasteners that were still just barely sticking through the spray foam, the closed cell spray foam. I want our listeners and our viewers to understand that you've got to have metal fully embedded in foam. Otherwise, it can get a frost ball on it when it gets real cold. It can condense. And it was condensing, and that bad insulation was just soaking it right up for you. So when we got on the phone, you and I talked, and it was like, okay, take this all out. And the recommendation was, don't go back to the bad insulation, just put more closed cell spray foam in, and the problem will go away.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, our house is rock solid. I think we have by the time it's all said and done, we have like 5 inches of closed cell spray foam. I mean, it's unbelievable. Obviously, I wouldn't in any of our new construction houses, we don't do 5 inches, but
No.
we ended up with an absolutely incredible home, and I wouldn't change it because of what I've learned. And it didn't scare me away, right? So many times you hear somebody has a bad
Yeah.
experience with a product, they're forever jaded, and they're going to speak bad about it. That's why I was drawn to your channel, is because when you talk about spray foam, you don't just talk about it because you use it. You provide documentation to back up what you're saying, and I think that's very important, especially in today's world with the internet. Anybody can get on there and say whatever they want. That's why I loved your channels, because I'm like, there's documentation here. Here's the proof behind what he is saying and why this works or doesn't work, or why it should be done or shouldn't be done. And honestly, that experience has given me a path forward to create the simplest, most efficient success for somebody to insulate their home.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying if somebody doesn't want to fork over the money that there isn't another way, because that's just not true. But
Right.
I mean, keeping things simple really makes the process a lot easier. Anybody that's watching has probably watched a lot of, the bigger YouTubers, Art in Our Buildings, The Build Show, and all those guys are really smart and great. But, a lot of what they're doing is an elite way of building that 99% of the people can't build. And there is a lot of room for error in
Mhm.
some of those methods of insulating. If you could hire one of them to do it, you might be okay. But if you hire the average Joe off the street, there's just a lot of room for error in those methods. There's part of me that wishes I had enough money that I could somehow test these different ways of insulating in the same climate. What is the performance difference? Because outside of a lab, are we testing these homes side by side with these different methods and saying, hey, this is cost effective or it isn't? You know what I mean?
One of the things that makes me so frustrated, and we're talking about this today to bring light on it, is, and this is the whole purpose for Think Spray Foam, is to have an online community to discuss everything to do with spray foam and spray foam installation, closed cell, open cell. But it never should have got to that in your situation. Like, the inherent risks of not putting up enough foam should be known by the installer. This is open to anybody, whether you've been spraying 20 years or you started 2 months ago spraying closed cell, open cell foam. You got to understand your fasteners have got to be embedded in foam in cold weather. Same thing in hot. I mean, if you're going to be putting air conditioning into buildings and you've got exposed areas, it's the opposite effect. It can condense to the outside. But too many of our tribe don't understand the inherent risks of what they're doing, and that if they don't do it right, this is going to be a spin-off. And then to recommend, all right, let's put additional insulation. What's the risk of that going to be? If the air gets through it and we change the dew point within the wall assembly, what's that going to do? And I'm really glad that you didn't turn jaded. This is exactly what we want. We want people to say, all right, if I made a mistake, here it is. And when you and I spoke, you said, what do I do? I said, just add more closed cell foam. You don't need to go up to 5-inch, but get more, because in a lot of cases you were at an inch or even a little less, things were poking through. You got the building updated, removed the drywall, added more closed cell spray foam. And when I followed back up with you, you had a really unique perspective. And it was, this is the way I want to build from here on out. Like, I don't want to go down this road again. This is going to be part of my specification. How did you come to that realization? Like, how did you build a very good structure, but you were talking about, if we're doing post frames, foam should be in. These 4 or 5 core things should be in your build. I remember you talking to me about that. What is that you were
Yeah.
discussing?
So when I went through this, I just, in my head, I'm thinking, how can I build the best home possible for my client in the most simple way? Because most people have a budget. Not everybody can just spend whatever they want.
Sure.
When you look at insulating your home, that's one of the most important steps in the process. In reality, that's going to make or break you, right? You have to air is your main issue. So you need an air barrier, you need a vapor barrier, you need the code required R value.
Right.
And so in my head, I'm thinking, I have an 8.5-inch wall cavity. I can, in a post frame, you build the entire structure first. Doors, windows are in, the structure's up, the steel is on. I can come in and I can spray 3 inches of closed cell spray foam. I will say this, which you just kind of touched on this. It's kind of scary. And this doesn't matter what profession you're in. There's people that take pride in their work and there's people that don't. There's people that are only worried about the paycheck. No matter what you're doing, you have to do your research and find a good installer. 'Cause at the end of the day, whenever there's a human involved, there's error that can be had. But if you have a good spray foamer, they come in, they will fill that gap behind that column, in that
Right.
inch and a half gap. They're sealing it all up. To me, it's so simple that I can do one thing and I can solve my air issues, my vapor barrier, my R value that I need per code, and it's done. Then I can have my trades come in and my electrical, my plumbing that's on the exterior walls is all in between that insulation and the drywall. It's fully accessible. It's not buried in anything. I'm not trying to cut, insulation around to fit around all that stuff perfectly. And it is just a really simple process. And if you look long term, and these are all things that I would love to somehow do, but if you look at long term at the what you recover in energy efficiency over the life of the home, like that extra money that it costs to use spray foam is by far worth it to me because you're eliminating some of the major issues that you can have when building a home.
Right.
And so in my motto with the way we build is we use a lot of exposed fastener steel. So if a client wants to use that, we have to use house wrap as far as the code goes. So we'll house wrap it, put the steel on, and then we can spray our spray foam. If somebody wants to use something other than spray foam, I will then require that you sheathe the house. And the reason being is because if I'm using a fibrous material in the walls and all I have between the outside and that fibrous material is a house wrap, well,
Mm.
if bugs can get behind the steel or your siding, eventually they could probably get through into your wall cavity in that fibrous material. Will find a way through there. Like I have a couple different ways that I'll do it, and that's it. I'm not trying to be difficult, but if this is kind of the way that I know it's going to be successful,
Right.
if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
No, absolutely. It would be scary to be house wrapped and batted, mineral fiber or fiberglass bats, because you just said it. There's just not much stopping the infiltration. And I don't think people understand the risks. And I mean, the spray foam guys, I've watched so many of them film their work on a post frame structure. They get up to the post, they don't get behind them. They leave that. They bring foam, closed cell foam on either side of the post. And now you, in essence, you have a cavity, an intentional cavity that you've created between that post and the outside. So water can get in there, can't get back out easy. So yeah, the closed cell foam has got to get back in behind the posts and then bring everything up on the sides so that things are fully air sealed. That way you're not knowingly creating additional areas for gaps to get in. And then the structural support that it's adding to these buildings is immense. You were talking about that. But at the same time that you were having your issues, there was a lot of other YouTube channels that did post frame, and they were doing the same thing, having issues with
Yes.
condensation, having issues with DIY. And then it started getting circulated around that you were having it, and what were your solutions? And I remember you talking to me saying, all of these people are experiencing the same thing. It's a condensation issue.
Yeah, so when we went through that, and I was in my entire build, I was very transparent. If I like screwed
Mhm.
something up, I would say, hey, this is what went wrong. This is why it went wrong. This is how I'm going to fix it. That's just who I am. Like anytime you're building a house, you're going to have some sort of challenge. So I'm sure I have all of the emails somewhere, but I can't even tell you how many emails I got from all over stick frame, post frame, people that watched my video and were like in different phases of construction, finished, that cut out drywall and saw that they had this same problem with condensation with the combination of closed cell spray foam or open cell, which is a whole nother issue,
Yep.
and this bad insulation. For insulation purposes, the code is written for fibrous materials, but I just can't grasp in my head, and I'm not a building science guy, but I feel like I have a good common sense look at things, and I'm like, why are we even allowing this to be an option? Like,
It
pick
shouldn't.
one or the other.
Absolutely.
So
And I had been outspoken leading up till then about not doing this in cold weather climate. It was going to create problems. It had violated a lot of very basic building science principles of just heat flow, that it was a matter of time that this would just be a huge issue and lawsuits just waiting to happen for everybody. I've been dead set against it. And I mean, I had a few people that have commented back and snapped back, clapped back at me and said, well, I've got my house and I'm not having issues. I'm like, well, maybe that you don't know of. Like, let's get it straight that this is for cold weather. Like, if you're in
yeah.
cold weather climates, this is going to be detrimental. If you're in a more modest climate, you can probably get away with it and be okay. But when you are walking into cold weather, so you're walking into all of Canada, in my opinion, east and west coast, upper United States, and I think only when you start to get down into the more southern states could this be an option. But at that point, if you've proven the science of why this is an issue, why would you want to have it anyhow? Pick one or pick the other. Don't mix oil and water. Fibers
Right.
and spray foam are not to be intermixed, in my opinion. Not like that, anyhow.
And an interesting thing you just said, like people will spout back and say, well, I don't have any problems. And I had builders say, well, I've never had this issue. But in a production home, Mike, this would have never been discovered in my house. It makes me ask the question, how many people in the country have medical issues that are related to black mold in their walls that they don't really know about? Because eventually it will dry up enough. I mean, you saw the massive amount of water that was in my wall, and it was only just a little bit. Had this been a production home where somebody came in, slapped on the baseboards, all that, no one would have ever seen it. It probably would have dried up, and only in extreme cases would it have, when it gets really
Right.
cold, it would have kept being a problem. But would
Right.
you have ever discovered it?
Right.
And so it makes me wonder because nobody's going around their house cutting out drywall. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Nobody does that.
you've got to have it. You've got to have the water dripping out, and then there's a failure, and then people see it. And one of the other people that we interviewed here a while back, Chad Duchesne, does home inspections, and his whole entire enlightenment on building science and building envelope was his kids being sick with mold, staying in their house. That was like, why are my kids always having these problems? And it was due to mold issues. So moving forward now, you're recommending to the community that this is the way to build. I remember you talking about that. You sort of had that epiphany. If you don't have the budget to put the spray foam in, wait another year to do your build, was one of the things that you had said to me.
There's only one other insulation type that I would use, but I've tried to grasp like doing stuff a different way, but I just can't get past how simple this is. This is the only insulation you can use from the far north to the far south.
Right.
Spray 3, 4 inches, and you're done. Like your air, vapor, all that is just solved for you. All of your mechanicals are inside that envelope. Your electric wires, your plumbing, and it's just so simple. And not to mention, like we talked about before, the massive amount of structural value you get from closed cell spray foam. There is no evaluation that is out there. There should be like half-inch drywall has a shear value. You're telling me that
Mm-hmm.
3 inches of 2 pound foam isn't like incredibly more than, a half-inch piece of drywall? It is.
Right.
It's crazy. Those are all tests that I would love to prove how strong this is and how efficient this is to build, right? Because we have an 8.5-inch wall cavity, and we have hardly any thermal bridging except for where our girts touch our posts. And then our frost protection goes down into the ground, comes up, and then we bring it up above where the finished floor, the concrete is, and then our spray foam attaches to it and goes straight up. And even if I could, I would have all of our underfloor stuff sprayed. I mean,
Right.
but for me to get people to pay for that, that's even more
Yeah.
difficult. And I get it. Everybody's on a budget, right? But
Yeah.
at minimum, you need to use it in your walls and, your ceiling. I just love it in that I've done cost comparison. It's really not that much different at the end of the day, because I'm not sure what it costs a few, but even at $1.50 a square foot per inch, that's including the labor here.
Right.
So at 3 inches, I'm paying 450. At 4 inches, I'm paying six, but that's including that's tax, labor, everything.
Right. Right.
That's not me freighting stuff in. That's not me, hiring somebody to do it. And then it brings in a whole nother element, which if you're doing a fibrous material, you have to have somebody that's going to come in and really do a good job of cutting around your wires, cutting around your pipe. And then you have to add the vapor barrier, and they have to seal around all the switch boxes, the outlet
Mm-hmm.
boxes. You know what I mean? It just, at the end of the day, when you start thinking about all that stuff, you're adding a lot of really technical work that is not going to be done for free. There are guys that are good out there that'll do it, but it's not cheap. And it's not cheap because it's very time consuming.
So going back to your structure there, I just had a video, well, not a video, a picture. So I had a guy that I met at SPFA, Spray Polyurethane Foam Alliance in Florida, and he wanted to know how much stronger we were making these walls. And he kept talking to me about this when we were down in Florida. He actually ended up buying me lunch. So yesterday, he sends me pictures in his shop. He made a 16 on center 2x6 box, sheeted the backside with 3/8 plywood. Top and bottom is just a single 2x6 plate. So it's a 2x6 box, 16 inches wide. Put 3 inches of closed cell foam in it, and then suspended it end for end on some studs so that there was hollow space underneath, and started stacking cinder blocks onto it. So he added one row of cinder blocks and another row of cinder blocks and another row, and he kept going up and up and up. Take a guess as to how much weight in cinder blocks he put into the middle of that wall before the wall buckled and snapped into the middle. In pounds, how many pounds of cinder blocks did he get
And
to
how
before?
and how
The
wide was
span, the span was, that's a very relative point. The span was like 4 or 5 feet maximum. I think it was
gosh,
4
I don't
feet because
know.
it must have been a 4x8 sheet. Must have been 4 feet.
I mean, I have no idea. I mean, 20,000?
Well, that's a good guess. 20,000 pounds? That's pretty good. It broke at 1,100 pounds of cinder blocks. Held 1,100 pounds, pushing it on the side for
That's
deflection.
crazy. Yeah, I'd have to see a picture to kind of really understand like what you're talking about. But like, I have a report that an engineer gave me, and it's not like a documented one, but it's all handwritten out. And
Yeah.
they were saying that it could add up to 300%
Yep.
to your shear value, which is crazy. And so I've
Absolutely.
often thought in my head, like, one, I want to prove that post frame is stronger when built properly, but to create, put in a continuous wall, build a 16-foot stick frame wall and a 16-foot post frame wall, have some way to measure the pounds at which they fail, and then put the 3 inches of closed cell spray foam and then do it again. Those are tests that would really show you like the actual strength that it gives.
Right. So tell me, when I'm coming to you and we're going to get a house built, we're going to sit down, we're going to build a 4,000 square foot post frame for me on my land. What are you sitting down and telling the client is the must haves? How does the Paul Marshall version go? What do you like to see? How would you do your build?
I mean, there's certain details that I do. As far as insulation, my recommendation is obviously closed cell spray foam. I like to
Mhm.
see it on the walls and the roof if possible. If they're only going to do the walls, then obviously we have to put a vapor barrier up on the ceiling and do some kind of other insulation in the
Right.
attic. But that's kind of a must for me is the closed cell in the walls, because if you don't do that, there's so many other things that we then have to do
Right.
in order to air seal your house.
Right.
And especially if it's on piers. It's on piers, you have that space between your piers
Hmm.
that, if you're not using closed cell spray foam, there's no way for me efficiently to seal between that gap there and then what goes up in your wall.
Right.
With closed cell spray foam, I attach, my frost protection goes down and they get sprayed attached to that. And now we have an air seal there. So, I mean, that's kind of I like a 8 foot on center standard outside of, garage doors. So my post spacing is all very strategic based on the NFPA design manual. I mean, my biggest hang up is insulation and what we're going to put on the outside of the house, because that determines, the choices we have to make.
What about roofs? Have you started to open up more on spray foam to the underside of roof deck and putting mechanical equipment up in the attic? How about that?
Yeah, so obviously my ideal situation is to spray the roof in, and as
Hmm.
well, we sheet all of our roofs no matter what.
Oh, good.
There's just That's another one of those things that this isn't an option. This is what we do because I've done it both ways, and there's so many other issues that you have to deal with when you don't sheet it. One, you have the metal, so you have to do something. I mean, you have to
Hmm.
make sure you're perfectly sealed off on your ceiling, and then any roof penetration, you have to add some kind of plywood structure to screw all of your
Oh, right.
flashings, and it just makes it so much more structurally strong. You can't see, with a post frame, you're going to have the purlins. If you don't sheath
Hmm.
it, you're going to see, no matter what you do, you're going to see the purlin lines through your
Hmm.
metal.
Hmm.
That's just kind of an inherent quality of metal. So that's pretty much eliminated when you add the sheathing. But yeah, if we can spray the roof deck, that's what I like to do.
Absolutely. And they're starting to see a lot more people get educated on why that is. There's been a little bit of blowback with people being afraid with the roofs, and we've got some experts coming on to talk about the non-vented roof details and just how solid they are. From a technical building science standpoint, and even from a risk standpoint, a lot of people have talked about the UK issues, but they're very, very different. They build differently and have different issues, and that's a whole nother subset section. But
Yeah, and the UK thing is a very interesting concept to me, and it's another one of those things that just got blown out of proportion in the fact that, one, if I'm going into a remodel, which all those were old
yep,
houses,
they were.
60, 80, 100 years old, that probably had one by slats with spaces with old underlayment on them. The thing that I tell people is if you're going to use spray foam, you have to first fix the roof. You
Yes.
can't just no matter what kind of insulation, you can't just go spray some. You wouldn't do that with anything else.
Nope.
You're Fix the first problem, then you add your insulation. And I think a lot of what they were using over there is open cell, which is a whole nother
They
issue.
did. They did.
When you're building your home, you have to make sure you have a good underlayment, because if your metal does have a leak, it's going to shed the water. So
Yeah.
put a good permeable underlayment on
Mhm.
there, and it should last a lifetime. I mean, that's
Right.
just crazy to me, like, that nobody was, brought up the fact that these were ancient homes and they didn't fix any of the initial problems.
You're right. We'll be doing a dedicated couple of videos to it, but to address it very quickly here for any listener that's made it this far in our podcast, there were some very unscrupulous decisions that were made to market the use of spray foam in lieu of fixing the roofs, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
Where it was like, don't spend 20,000 pounds getting a new roof, just add some spray foam to the underside of it. And it was like, whoa, let's think this through. Like, don't fix the leaks in the ship. Like, come on, this is gonna. And that's very true. I've had a couple of people with metal buildings, and if the fasteners back out, the screws back out, or the washers, the rubber washers under the screws are damaged, the water's coming in through the screws, gets behind the metal, gets in contact. And if there's not a good underlay, and shedding the water, they can rot out the plywood. And I had one person that said, this was all the spray foam's fault. I'm like, well, there was closed cell spray foam to the back of the plywood, but the issue was the failure that they didn't have a proper underlay. And so
Right.
the water that got past the metal, they just screwed the metal down to the plywood. That was it.
Hmm.
So it was a matter of time until that water got back in behind it, rotted out the deck. Closed cell spray foam stopped it from coming in, and they're trying to blame that this is a closed cell spray foam issue. And I was like, not a chance. It was
Yeah.
external on the roofs problem.
There's so many other variables that people never look at that they don't understand. You can't
Right.
just put
Right.
you can't put OSB sheathing on a roof and then not make sure your screws are going into the purlins, because
Right.
OSB isn't meant to hold, like, you know what I mean? I snap lines and make sure all my screws, I use longer screws and make sure they're going into the purlins, so there isn't
Mm.
that movement there,
Right.
because OSB just isn't meant to hold those fasteners like that.
Agreed.
And this goes far beyond the UK, it goes here. But if a spray foam contractor came to a remodel and was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, but based on looking at your roof deck, you need to rip the roof off, new underlayment," he's going to lose that job,
Mm.
right? Because nobody wants to spend that money. But that's what they
Right.
should be telling them, is like,
Right.
this just isn't ready for spray foam. And that's tough, because when people need work, but on the same side, you're just exacerbating the problem, and then it makes spray foam look bad, when the
Correct.
fact is there's just other things that need to be fixed.
Correct. And that's why I think spray foam and the app and the community that we have is going to be so vital here, is to be able to have podcast discussions like this. And then people like yourselves being on the app and being able to post pictures on site and say, hey, to the community, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing that. We always do this, we always do that. And you'll elevate the tide for everybody, lift everybody up. It'll improve it for everybody. So in closing, Paul, you've been extremely generous with your time here today. I appreciate it very much. Where do you see the future? You've gone from law enforcement, you've gone to homesteading, building your house, avoiding a huge disaster with spray foam. Now you're building plans, you're building houses for people. What's the future? What's the next 4 or 5 years for MrPostFrame and your family look like? What do you see things happening?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that Emily and I want to do is, I mean, we get thousands of questions, right? So we created this patron community where people that want to self build, people that want to self GC, builders that want to get into post frame industry can join this group. We help them navigate this process. We want to educate people as much as we can on building a home and how to properly do it, how to weigh, here's my budget versus here are my options. How do we say we're going to choose this insulation over this, and why would we
Mm-hmm.
do that? And help people, because it's overwhelming. It was funny, we were at the IBS last week and you see all of these products, and they're extremely elevated products, right? They're products that 90+% of Americans cannot afford in their house.
Right.
But Emily brought up a good point that these products always existed. There was always an elite level of products, but now with social media and YouTube and all this, now everybody knows about them. You have people showing them being put in houses. So everybody gets this mindset that, oh, I have to have that in my house in order for it to be a good house. And that's just not the case. You need to keep the process simple. For most people, you need to have a simple plan, because there's less room for error. And that's why I love closed cell spray foam. And for all the people out there that want to badmouth spray foam on their carbon footprint and all that, they've come a long way, right? With the new blowing agents and all that, it is a good product. It's a simple way to ensure that you're getting all of the things you need in your structure, air sealing, all that. So we want to educate people on that as much as we can, help them navigate it. And I'm not the type of person that says if you don't do this, then you're going to have a bad build, because it's not the way it is. And I understand everybody's different, but we want to help people navigate those, because I get so many emails. There's like, I don't know what to choose. I watch the build show, I watch R&R buildings, I watch this, and they're like, putting 2 layers of, rigid insulation on the roof and strapping, and should I be doing this? And it's so much for people to, like, just take in, right? If you're not
Yeah.
in the industry and educating yourself.
Yeah, they have an overflow of information but no clarity, and it becomes a paralysis of analysis.
Yes, that's exactly right. Like, you just sit there and you mull over these decisions forever until you don't even know what to do.
Well, that's awesome. I'm going to wrap it up right there. I think we're going to get you back on because there's some more things we can drill down and talk about and have your expertise on, and really elevate people, help them. And that's what this is about. Getting the information out there, people that you can trust what's being said, and explained in layman's terms why. That's the important, because that's
Right.
just what you said. Not being baffled with bullshit, and fancy
Yeah.
words. Exactly.
No, I get it.
Paul, you have a Patreon account that you've developed just to help people get educated. You got to get paid for your time and everything, because your time is very valuable. You've got a huge multiplier. What they learn in your events, in your Patreon account, saves them tens of thousands. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really a group it's for people that want to self-build, self-GC. We have builders that want to learn post frame. It's an online community. There's an app where we have different categories. They can ask questions. You've actually been on one of our lives with us
Right.
answering questions on insulation, but it's really to help people make the best decisions possible and when to make those in the build process. So we have lots of online resources that we provide people that are part of our membership at a discount. Like we have budget sheets, we have a 115-page planning guide that Emily and I developed from self building to custom building homes, and it covers everything from A to Z. So it literally saves people thousands of dollars in their overall cost. So for a very minimal cost to be a part of the group. And it's a great community because you find people that are building in your
Mm,
area.
right.
So you
Community.
can really work together on, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. Maybe you can get products shipped, cheaper because you're getting both of your stuff shipped on the same shipment. So it's been really awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for having you and Emily on. You told an amazing story, one that is really interesting to hear. And I think we got to get you back on eventually, not too long from now, drill down on some other subjects that people will be interested to hear about. So thank you for coming on the Think Spray Foam podcast.
Yeah, we appreciate you having us on there, and we're happy to do it again.